somebody else is here. I think he's watching us. He's coming towards us. Oh my god, he has a gun.
Don't move! We're not gonna do anything, okay? We're gonna cooperate. Just tell me what you want us to do. You're welcome to everything I have. If there's anything else I could do for you, maybe I could write you a check.
He's a sociology major.
Don't get up. I want her to tie you up. You know, just because people are going to ask, was that thing even loaded?
On the night of March 22nd, 1970, 22-year-old Kathleen Johns was driving to visit her mother with her 10-month-old daughter beside her. While driving along, a car behind her began honking its horn and flashing its headlights. Believing he was indicating a fault with her vehicle, Kathleen Johns immediately pulled off the road and stopped. The car parked beside her and a man exited the vehicle and approached the car. The man told her that one of the back wheels on her car was wobbling and kindly offered to tighten it up for her, to which she duly obliged. The man appeared to be tightening the lug bolts, but he was actually loosening them. After finishing, the man bid her farewell and drove away. When Kathleen pulled forward to re-enter the highway, the wheel almost immediately came off the car. The man reappeared stating, "It must have been worse than I thought," and then offered Kathleen a lift to the nearest service station. Stranded with a 10-month-old baby, Kathleen had little choice but to accept his offer. When Kathleen approached the car carrying her child, the man stated, "I didn't realise you had a baby." During the ride, the car passed several service stations, but the man did not stop, claiming they were all closed. After driving for about 90 minutes back and forth around the California back roads, the man turned to Kathleen and said, "Before I kill you, I'm going to throw your baby out the window." He also told her, "Don't panic, don't scream, just wait and see what happens." When the driver finally stopped at an intersection, Kathleen jumped out with her daughter and hid in a field. The driver searched for her using a flashlight, telling her that he would not hurt her, before eventually giving up. Unable to find her, he got back in the car and drove away. The man then drove back to Kathleen's empty car and set it on fire. Meanwhile, Kathleen hitched a ride to the nearest police station. Once at the police station, she spotted a wanted poster for the Zodiac killer and frantically identified him as being the kidnapper. A serial killer in the San Francisco Bay Area taunts police with his letters and cryptic messages. Robert Graysmith is a cartoonist who works for the San Francisco Chronicle. His quirky ways irritate Paul Avery, a reporter whose drinking gets in the way of doing his job. The two become friends thanks to a shared interest, the Zodiac killer. Graysmith steadily becomes more obsessed with the case as Avery's life spirals into drunken oblivion. When Robert Graysmith sold the film rights to use his book, Zodiac, the shocking true story of the nation's most bizarre mass murderer, director David Fincher began work on the 2007 investigative thriller Zodiac. The Zodiac killer murdered 5 victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between 1968 and 1969. He targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver. 2 of his attempted victims survived. The Zodiac himself claimed to have murdered 37 victims, but it's believed he was taking credit for unsolved cases. He mailed letters to regional newspapers, threatening killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed. In these letters he included cryptic puzzles known as ciphers, which would translate to letters when solved. All in all, he sent 4 ciphers, one of which took 51 years to solve, and 2 ciphers remain unsolved to this day. The Zodiac ceased written communications around 1974. He was never caught and his identity is a mystery to this day. The first murders attributed to the Zodiac killer were the shootings of high school students 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday. On December 20th, 1968, the couple were on their first date and planned to attend a Christmas concert at their high school. They instead visited a friend before stopping at a local restaurant and then driving out to Lake Herman Road. At about 10:15 p.m, Faraday parked the car in a gravel turnout. They were later found dead outside the vehicle, Faraday with a single bullet wound to the head and Jensen with multiple bullet wounds to her back. From the position their bodies were found, it would appear the killer ordered them out of the car and shot them as they fled the scene.
Could you briefly describe what apparently happened last night?
We had a double homicide. Possibly they were ordered out of the car by the responsible, and the boy was shot right at the side of the car, and the girl apparently tried to run, and she was shot and found 28 feet further on.
The second set of killings would also be a young couple, 22-year-old Darlene Ferron and 19-year-old Michael Mageau. On July 4th, 1969, just before midnight, Darlene Ferron and Michael Mageau drove into the Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. While the couple sat in Ferron's car, a car drove into the lot and parked alongside them, but almost immediately drove away. Mike then asked Ferron if she knew who that was, to which she replied, "It was a friend, don't worry about it." Later, a second car drove up and parked behind them. A man exited the car holding a flashlight. The man then directed the flashlight into Mageau and Ferron's eyes before shooting them, firing 5 times. Both victims were hit and several bullets had passed through Mageau and into Ferron. The killer walked away from the car, but upon hearing Mageau's moaning, returned and shot each victim twice before driving off. Michael Mageau would survive this attack and state that he believed that the second car was the first one that had parked alongside them. This would mean Darlene Ferron knew the Zodiac killer, but unfortunately when the police found her, she was unconscious and died of her injuries in hospital.
Who was that, Tony?
Don't worry about it.
The next day at 12:40 a.m, a man phoned the Vallejo Police Department to report and claim responsibility for the attack. The caller also took credit for the murders of Jensen and Faraday 6.5 months earlier. Calling from a phone booth at a gas station, he stated, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you'll find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." When the police telephone operator took this message, she was struck by the way the man said goodbye.
He spoke in a monotone. He had a very non-emotional voice, but his voice really changed when he came to goodbye. And it wasn't just goodbye, but he said something like goodbye.
Just under a month later, the Zodiac killer sent nearly 3 identical letters to the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. He took credit for the previous murders and demanded these letters be put on the front page of their newspapers, or more murders would be committed. The letter began, "This is the murderer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman, plus the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know." Each letter also included a 1/3 408 symbol cryptogram which the killer claimed contained his identity. The Chronicle printed their letter along with a quote from Police Chief Jack Stiltz, saying they couldn't be sure this was the real murderer and asked he send more evidence to support his statement. 6 days later, a second letter was received by the San Francisco Examiner. The letter began, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This is the first time the killer had used his name for identification. The letter was in response to the police chief Jack Stiltz requiring more evidence that he was the killer. The Zodiac included details about the murders that had not been released to the public. The letter read as follows, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. In answer to your asking for more details about the good times I had in Vallejo, I shall be happy to supply even more material. By the way, are the police having a good time with the code? If not, tell them to cheer up. When they do crack it, they will have me." The letter went on to say, "What I did was tape a small pencil flashlight to the barrel of my gun. All I had to do was spray them as if it was a water hose. There was no need to use the gun sights. I was not happy to see that I did not get front page coverage. A day later, the 408 symbol cryptogram cipher was cracked by two teachers, Donald and Betty Harden of California. The cipher translated read, "I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The cipher went on to read, "I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for the afterlife." Over a month later, on September 27, 1969, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Baricia. A white man about 5 foot 11 inches, weighing more than 170 pounds, approached them wearing a black executioner's type hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eyes and a bib-like device on his chest that had a white cross-circle symbol on it. As he neared them, they realised he was holding a gun. The hooded man claimed to be an escaped convict where he had killed a guard and subsequently stolen a car, explaining that he now needed their car and money to travel to Mexico. The man brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell before he tied her up. While Shepard was tying Hartnell, they spoke quietly to each other.
While she was tying me up, I mentioned to her that I thought that I could get the gun. And she says, "Oh no, don't try anything." He stepped back about 2 or 3 feet from that, and I never really had an opportunity again.
The killer then checked and tightened Hartnell's bonds after discovering that Shepard had bound Hartnell's hands too loosely. Hartnell, once tied down, asked the man if the gun was actually loaded, to which he revealed a full magazine. The man then drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly, Hartnell suffering 6 and Shepard 10 wounds in the process. The killer then hiked 500 yards back up Knoxville Road and drew the cross-circle symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt-tip pen. He also wrote, Vallejo 12/20/68, 7/4/69, September 27, 69, 6:30, by knife. At 7:40 p.m. the killer called the Napa County Sheriff's Office from a payphone to report his latest crime. The killer first stated to the operator that he wished to report a murder, before stating that he had been the perpetrator of the crime. When the phone was found, it was off the hook. Cecilia Shepard was conscious when the police arrived and gave a detailed account of the man, but died on her way to the hospital.
And I asked her if she saw him clearly before he put the hood on, and she said, "Yes, I did." I said, "What color was his hair?" She said, "Well, it was brown." I said, "Well, how tall?" She said, "Well, he's just a little bit taller than you." How much did he weigh? She said he was overweight, bulky looking.
Brian Hartnell would survive this attack. He too gave a detailed description of what the man looked like. These are the police sketches. Brian's story is the only reason that the world learned about the killer's bizarre costume. 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, a white male passenger entered a cab driven by Paul Stein, requesting to be driven to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. For reasons unknown, Stein drove 1 block past Maple to Cherry Street. The passenger then shot Stein once in the head with a 9mm handgun. He then took Stein's wallet and car keys and tore away a section of Stein's blood-stained shirt. The man was observed by 3 teenagers across the street at 9:55 p.m, and they phoned the police while the crime was in process. 2 blocks from the crime scene, patrol officers Don Falk and Eric Zelms, responding to the call, observed a white man walking along the sidewalk. However, the police radio dispatcher had alerted officers to be on lookout for a black suspect, so Falk and Zelms drove past the man without stopping. This was the last chance the police would get to catch the Zodiac killer. The 3 team witnesses worked with a police artist to prepare a composite sketch of Stein's killer. This is the police composite sketch that was released publicly. 3 days later, on October 14th, 1969, the Chronicle received another letter from the Zodiac killer, this time containing a swatch of Paul Stein's shirt tail as proof he was the killer. The letter also included a threat about killing school children on a school bus. In this letter, he described he would just shoot out the front tyre and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. On November 8th, 1969, the Zodiac mailed a card with another cryptogram consisting of 340 characters. This cipher, dubbed Z340, remained unsolved for over 51 years. On December 5th, 2020, it was deciphered by an international team of private citizens. It read, "I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise." The letter went on rambling about how the killer wasn't afraid of death. The next day, the Zodiac mailed a 7-page letter stating that 2 policemen stopped and actually spoke with him 3 minutes after he shot Stein. He wrote, "The police shall never catch me, because I've been too clever for them. 1. I look like the description passed out, but only when I do my thing. The rest of the time I look entirely different." The letter went on to say, "P.S. 2 cops pulled a goof about 3 minutes after I left the cab. I was walking down the hill to park when this cop pulled up, plus one of them called me over, plus asked if I saw anyone acting suspicious or strange in the last 5 to 10 minutes. Plus I said yes, there was this man who was running by waving a gun, and the cops peeled rubber. Plus went around the corner as I directed them. Plus I disappeared into the park a block. Plus half away, never to be seen again." On December 20th, 1969, exactly 1 year after the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, the Zodiac mailed a letter to Belly that included another swatch of Stein's shirt. Zodiac continued to communicate with authorities for the remainder of 1970 via letters and greeting cards to the press. In a letter postmarked April 20th, 1970, the Zodiac wrote, "My name is," followed by a 13-character cipher that hasn't been solved to this day. The Zodiac went on to state that he was not responsible for the recent bombing of a police station in San Francisco, but added, "There is more glory to killing a cop than a SID." The letter included a diagram of a bomb the Zodiac claimed that he would use to blow up a school bus, but he never did. There would be no more killings, only an attempted abduction as mentioned at the beginning of this retrospective. He would become the most famous serial killer never to be caught, along with Jack the Ripper. A young David Fincher was drawn to the Zodiac story because he spent much of his childhood in San Francisco during the time of the murders. Fincher recalled how as a child he came home from school one day after noting how a police car had been following his bus. His father matter-of-factly replied, "Oh yeah, there's a serial killer who's killed 4 or 5 people, who calls himself Zodiac. He's threatened to take a high-powered rifle and shoot out the tyres of a school bus and then shoot the children as they come off the bus." Fincher felt his job was to dispel the enduring mythic stature of the case by clearly defining what was fact and what was fiction.
I grew up in the Bay Area during this period of time. And then when they stopped talking about him or stopped writing about him or stopped mentioning him, all of a sudden it was like it had never happened.
He wanted the screenplay rewritten with research done from the original police reports. Fincher spent months interviewing witnesses, family members of suspects, retired and current investigators, and the mayors of San Francisco and Vallejo.
I said, "This isn't going to be some cheap movie you're going to throw together." He says, "We're going to do the best we can to make it accurate." I says, "Well, if you'll promise me that, I'll get involved."
Even when we did our own interviews, we would talk to 2 people. One would confirm some aspects of it, and another would deny it. Plus, so much time had passed, memories are affected, and the different telling of the stories would change perception. So when there was any doubt, we always went with the police reports. Fincher went to great lengths to replicate the murder scenes as accurately as possible.
Zodiac Island doesn't look like it did then. The trees are gone, and we had to reconstruct it.
I'm amazed at the authenticity of
Brian Hartnell, who is a survivor of a Zodiac attack, served as advisor to the film. The producers also hired a private investigator to track down the real-life Zodiac survivor, Michael Mageau. Because he wanted the film to be as accurate as possible, David Fincher decided not to depict any of the alleged victim murders for which there were no surviving victims or witnesses. Invariably for location shots, it was cheaper to digitally erase satellite dishes rather than physically taking them down. The murder victims' costumes were meticulously recreated from forensic evidence that was lent to the production. The film starred Jake Gyllenhaal as Robert Graysmith, Mark Ruffalo as Inspector Dave Toshke, Robert Downey Jr. as Paul Avery, Brian Cox as Melvin Belly, and John Carroll Lynch as Arthur Lee Allen. David Fincher wanted to cast Jake Gyllenhaal based on his performance in the 2001 cult classic Donnie Darko.
And the mere fact that this choice exists would make all preformed destiny come to an end.
Not if you travel within God's channel.
I'm not going to be able to continue this conversation.
Why?
I could lose my job.
Okay.
The character of Paul Avery's addiction was largely fictionalized. In fact, the character's lifestyle was very similar to Robert Downey Jr.'s at the time. During filming, Fincher would do take after take in a Stanley Kubrick style of directing. This caused the actors a lot of distress, especially Robert Downey Jr., who would leave bottles filled with urine on film as a protest. In one of the Zodiac letters, he muses on who will portray him in a film about him. In this film, he is portrayed by 3 separate actors, and in any shot featuring the Zodiac, the actors' faces are always out of focus or obscured. This serves to keep the audience guessing, and perhaps as a bark at the actual Zodiac killer, so that he wouldn't be portrayed by a visible or famous actor. Nancy Slover, the Vallejo operator who took the first Zodiac call, was asked to help provide voice direction by selecting an audio recording of readings by various unidentified actors. After selecting the recording that sounded closest to the Zodiac, it was revealed that she selected a reading by John Carroll Lynch, who plays prime suspect Arthur Lee Allen. At around 1 hour and 45 minutes, in the restaurant scene where Robert Graysmith is treating David Toschi to a hamburger, Toschi chews the hamburger for some time before spitting the chewed food into a napkin. The reason for this is because Mark Ruffalo, who played Toschi, is a vegetarian and refuses to consume meat. Zodiac is a film about obsession. The characters are desperate to find the identity of the Zodiac.
It was Rick.
No, it wasn't.
It was Rick. It was Rick Marshall.
No.
Just say it.
It wasn't Rick.
Ultimately, they are searching for a resolution, but there is no resolution. As with obsession, it never ends.